Jason Wygant down here at the start for the Unadilla GNCC. A huge crowd has gathered. We've had 1,600 plus racers this weekend, and a lot of it is because this form of racing is so popular in the Empire State of New York. And New York's finest is lined up behind me. That's Nate Canny, ranked 14th in the series last year, but he peaked for Unadilla, where he finished second overall behind Yuha 1 year ago. Can he do it again? He admitted to us the pressure is a little bit higher now because people are expecting him to do it again, but with all the rain we've taken on, guys from New York have a lot of experience in that stuff, and it would not be surprising to see the number 14 on the podium again. Before we go racing, let's check out our Scott USA helmet cam.
All right, thanks a lot, Jason Wygant, as we head out onto the course. And like you mentioned, we do have some rain showers that had fallen in the overnight hours. Added insult to injury with rain showers during our morning race program, and it's created quite a bit of a, rough and rugged track out there. I mean, it's passable, but it's going to be tough. As you can see, very wet out there. A lot of roots are exposed. A lot of ruts from our ATV racing on Saturday, and a lot of mud holes. So there's going to be a lot of challenges that are going to be facing our riders out there during our pro race. And not only these pro riders got the track that they got to contend with out there, but they've also got to keep in mind that we've got nearly 500 participants in this afternoon race. They're going to be starting behind the 27 pros on row number 1. So it's going to create quite a bit of a mess out there on the racetrack. And with those rain showers that fell during that morning AM race, it made the track that much worse. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one all pans out. As we can see, for the most part, a rather wide open racetrack. There are some tight areas out there, but plenty of passing opportunities ought to be afforded all of our motorcycle pilots here this afternoon as we get set to go. As we can see, rain showers falling just prior to the race, and this is some shots from earlier in the day in the AM race, and look how sloppy it was then. Now, things aren't nearly as bad as far as the standing water on the race course now for our pro race, but it has done its damage, as we'd like to say, and that kid, I think, has had all the damage he can stand have done to him. As we head down to the first row here in our afternoon bike race, and look at here, off and rolling, Jimmy Jarrett steals the whole shot. The 158 from out of Beloit, Ohio, actually grabbing the early lead. Now, whoa, and look at that. That was Brock Hepler. He was running a solid top 3-4 positions there. He slides out aboard the number 60. By the way, Hepler on the starting line, and this is his first ever Grand National Cross Country race, and kind of history at the same time we'll talk about in a moment. First, let's take a look at the RaceFX whole shot as we see Jimmy Jarrett besting Juha Salminen, which has not been done very often in this 2006 racing season. He grabs a fistful of throttle and never looks back, at least through these first few turns. There you see Hepler sliding in, but as we were mentioning there a moment ago, the first time we've ever had a professional motocross racer that has won in that season, racing in the same season in the Grand National Cross Country race. We'll see how he does. Row number 2, our 258 class. We got 60 riders that are all vying for a top spot in that first turn, and several of them are going to be left behind, it looks like. Some of the riders to keep an eye out for: the 16 of Travis Green, the 17 of Scott Watkins, the 19 of Jesse Robinson, the 28 also of Thaddeus Duvall, just to name a few of those guys, including Chris Gauld, Aaron Wegner, Joe Marsh, Justin Tucker, Joseph Shearer, Christopher G., Joshua Strang. Now, Joshua Strang from Australia is actually a friend of Glenn Carney, who came over from Australia to try his hand at GNCC Racing, so we'll see how things do for him in his efforts aboard that 114. Ben Bowens also out there, Jesse Mastine, Ben Dabo, Jesse Priest, Adam Mallory, Aaron Mallory, Jared Stoner, also Greg Martinotti, just to name a few of those 60 riders that are all vying for those top spots out there on row number 2. As we head down to row number 3, we got what looks like the 4-stroke A classes, 0 to 300 cc, and the 301 cc plus classes. Guys like Mike Mihalik, Morgan Green in this one. He's the younger brother of Travis Green, who rides the 258 class. Joey Baker's out there, Charles Hathaway, also Brett Zofchak in the 301 cc plus class. Jason Bayo, Adam Clark, James Steiner, Brandon Camp. We got John Koimer, Bill Legg, Robert Langenbach, and John Horn. Edward Pacini also out there, Stephen Ackley, Daryl Kingsley, Paul Kosman, Ben Smith, Michael Siggety, Mark Toth, Brett Ward. A lot of these guys from the 0 to 300 cc division, as you can see. A lot of work just to get through the first turns. You got to imagine what's it going to be like out there on the trail. Reports are at the 1.5 mile marker, it gets pretty rough out there, so it's going to be interesting to see as row number 3 is now getting things sorted out there. We'll head down to row number 4 next. It's going to be our Vet A plus 30 class. Got 40 riders in this one. Guys like Phil Smith, Lester Partlow, Sean Remington, Brian Bolyard, Brad Baston, Gary Ostergaard, Stephen Popolaski, Michael Casale, also Mark White, Kabrul Tasha. We've got Frank Messina, Tom Pierce, Leonard Baltimore, Greg Calkins, Brian Ward, Don Davis, Carmen Tino, Todd McKinney, Charles Seguin, Greg Elrod, Ken LeGill, Russell Bauer, Randy Gardner, also Wayne Grinswick, Thomas Chikoski, Harry Grant, Todd Murfitt, Kevin Schuler, and William Rock, to name a few of those guys in that Vet A 30-plus class, 40 of them total. Down to row 5 now, the 200A class. Todd Moraine, Logan Chillman, Charles Hugel, Nick Hunter, Mark Fortner, William Gilliland, Nathan Hubbard, Andrew Carlson, Alex Mallory, Matthew Perry, Cameron Hartnett, also Brian Tucker, Steve Poore, Michael Maurer, Zachary Nevadomoski, Michael Stryker, Robert Stringer, also Caleb Russell out there on the KTM, Craig Evans, Kevin Knott, John Bennett, and more. 33 of them, as we said, 200A. Up next is going to be our Open A class. Guys like Chris Bazzelli, Marty Michaels, Dave Simcock, Robert Patterson, Alan Irvin, Frank Gallo, Nathaniel Kalir, Judd Kalir, Edward Moorhead, Travis Johnson, Andrew Miller, Todd Gates, Jeff Schneider, James Dean, Trevor Cobb, and George Romeo. 16 riders in the Open A class, row number 6, as we head down to row number 7. The Senior A plus 40 coming up next. We got 32 riders that are at least 40 years of age or older as we head down the line. It looks like Randall Riggs, Bruce Snyder, Lance Longo, Mark Davis, Edward Dayer, Tom Rowe, Joseph Geyer, Patrick Anderson, Richard Hines, David McCall, Gary Saliga, Daniel Fish, Terry Hadley, Dennis Decker, the 441. There you see another whole shot in the history books for that rider. Ronald Parmalee, Rick Blue, Steve Deo, Michael Zahoski, Eric Gill, Jeff Kirchner, and Marty Mears. Art Trombley also in the mix, as well as Jeffrey Forrest and a few other folks on row number 7 in our Senior A plus 40 class. We head down to the 4-stroke B class on row number 8 next. William Hears, Casey Smith, Mark Dwyer, Matt Forrest, Michael Funk, Ryan Burkfield, David Snyder, Corey Booth, Josh Lane, Luke Towery, Kenneth Marty, Michael Bush, Andrew Suter, David Goyen, Jaron Ings, and Christopher Dennison. And Dennison all the way from California, talking about your coast-to-coast travels for a GNCC race. We welcome him all the way out. Got a lot of East Coasters out there. And New York, you didn't expect to see very many West Coasters. Not a lot, but even seeing any, quite a few. We got John Beaver out there also, Dave Janis, Sean O'Connell, and more, row number 9. 250B class. We've got 50 riders in this one. Chris Cunty, also Bruce Thornhill, Christopher Laughmain, Kenny Blacksheen, Martin Miller, Russell Morris, Jordan Sane, Larry Hooper, Michael O'Boyan, John Ayers, Peter Houston, Chase Bishop, Kevin Jinks, also David Burnham, Corey Buttrick out there in this one on his 250B class. He graduated from the youth ranks just a few short weeks ago as we head out on the racetrack now and try to catch up with the leaders and see what's going on. As we see there, it looks like U-Haul Salmon has gotten around the 158 and did it just there through that section of Jimmy Jarrett now. So Jarrett drops off to a second-place position through the Suzuki Special Test, and line choices of the utmost importance, and it looks like U-Haul most definitely chose the correct line there because he was able to work his way through that pack and move into the number 1 spot through some of those alternate lines that have developed since that morning race or during that morning race and now carrying over into this afternoon race here at the Suzuki Special Test. Back out front with our leaders now at the 2.5-mile marker. Juha Salminen continues to hold on to the lead and not able to stretch this one out. Jarrett still back in that number 2 spot back there. And Charlie Mullins up to a 3rd place position aboard the number 4. Didn't get the best of starts out there, but he worked his way up through the pack. Paul Whibley running in a 4th place position on the Moose Parts Unlimited Honda. Nate Canny running in a 5th place position. If you remember a year ago, Nathan Canny had the race of a lifetime here in his home state of New York. Justin Williamson, who actually come off of a pretty good finish at the WISP GNCC a couple of races ago, the race before the break, trying to make his way through these thick, muddy sections of this race course at this 2.5-mile marker. We said the 1.5 was tough. Look at this, 2.5 also looks to be pretty tough itself as we see some of the tail pack of our professional riders making their way through. And I'm not sure, but that looked like maybe Glenn Carney working his way through, as well as the 23 machine. Looks like the mud is taking its toll. Brian Lawson out of Adams, Massachusetts. He's one of these northeastern riders, too. You'd think that he might be able to manipulate the muddy sections a little better than what he was. That looked like that might have been Travis Green aboard the number 16, actually making his way by. The 17 is Scott Watkins checking in from that 250A class on row number 2. And see if we can figure out who this young man is. Nope, there's the 114 machine, though. That's Joshua Strang from Australia, Glenn Carney's buddy. And it looks like he's one of the top 5 in the early goings of this Unadilla GNCC. With the sunshine shining through the trees like it is right now, it's hard to believe that only a few short hours ago the rain was coming down and created the havoc that we see out here now. Nearing the 3.5-mile marker, this is the world-famous Unadilla motocross track. Taking a look at our leaders, it's Salmon and Mullins up to 2nd. Now Jarrett has dropped off to 3rd. Whibley still holds on to 4th. Nate Canny still rounds out the top 5. And Justin Williamson back there in the 6th place position. Looks like he might be knocking on the door to Canny's 5th place ride. We'll see if we get a good shot of that. Listen to the crowd. You can tell that they're happy to see Juha Salminen make his way around. Look at that. Nate Canny has moved up to 2nd. Now back to 3rd is Charlie Mullins. Whibley in 5th place, as we've seen some major changes taking place there. And Nate Canny's moved up to 4th. There's Justin Williamson aboard that number 12, still holding a solid 6th. And if you notice, Justin Williamson is uncontested right now for that 6th place position, and he hasn't really even put any pressure on the top 5 yet, so he's rather comfortable right now. And if he can continue to run this pace and keep those front 5 somewhat in sight, we might actually see something out of Williamson again here today. You know, traditionally you wouldn't expect him to be that strong of a rider here at Unadilla in the Northeast because of, well, the different conditions than what he grew up in down in Sanford, Florida, but he seems to be adapting quite well. Look at this, a new leader. Nate Canny does it again. Last year he got in this position. Let's see if he's going to be able to hang on to it. Jimmy Jarrett up to 2nd. Must be problems for the 111 of Juha Salminen, who's at times struggled in the mud here in the 2006 season. We've got to battle back to the 4th place position as Salmonen's dropped off to 3rd. Mullins is knocking hard on the door now. Paul Whibley in 5th. And believe it or not, Mullins was up there in the front with Juha Salminen for a little bit. So we've seen a lot of changes taking place over the course of the last few miles of racing. Jimmy Jarrett still in 2nd. Look how rough this racetrack is up through here. We saw it in the ATV racing yesterday, how rough the racetrack got, but I don't think that that it was anywhere near what we're seeing here today. And a lot of that, again, rain showers overnight, insult to injury, rain showers during the morning race, and created quite an obstacle for the riders out there. And it looks like it continues to be an obstacle even for our pro riders as they're just kind of feeling their way through on this first lap, as we've already seen a couple of different lead changes take place. Salminen was up front, Mullins was up front, now Nate Canny is up front, and the 2 that were up front battling have dropped back to 3rd and 4th place positions. So evidently this is not a very easy race course to make your way around. See some half-lap pit strategies going on there. Get those fresh goggles, win, and where you can out there. Back out front with our leaders. This is near the 8-mile marker, out near the 8.5 actually. Nate Canny trying to walk away with this, and Jimmy Jarrett in the number 2 spot. We could possibly see a couple of not so familiar names on the podium today, unless guys like this, Juha Salminen and Charlie Mullins, who's back in the number 4 spot, are able to get up there and knock him off. Paul Whibley also in the hunt for his first ever podium here in GNCC racing as he's running in a 5th place position. We'll see whether or not he's able to pull that one off. We got some battling going on back there. Looks like Barry Hawk may be struggling just a little bit on the number 3 Ampro Yamaha. Traditionally, Barry up front with the rest of the pack, battling with Juha as a matter of fact, and sometimes and a lot of times even with his own teammate Charlie Mullins, but that is not the case here today at the Unadilla GNCC. Again, round 11 of the Suzuki Grand National Cross Country Championship Series. We head out nearing the completion of this first lap of racing. Canny still in the number 1 spot. And look how sloppy it is out there. The sunshine, very deceiving. If you're a weather watcher, you're looking at this saying, oh, what a beautiful day we have in New York. Yes, most definitely is a beautiful day, but the conditions as far as the race is concerned is not that beautiful itself, unless you like mud. And I think that that might be the allure for a lot of the GNCC racing fans and riders, is the different conditions that they got to get in. And, you know, as a race fan, you can get out there and get right in the mud with them and have a good time and become a mud flea, if you will. And I think that's part of the attraction of being a GNCC fan as well. As you can see, Mullen's not really pushing things right now. He's just kind of riding a slow pace right behind U-Haul, not pushing things any whatsoever. Got a new 5th place ride. Cole Calkins working his way up through the pack now. Not seen a lot out of him. He's actually been out of the racing and out of contention, I should say, for the most part of the last 2 years due to wrist injuries. But it looks like he's finally getting back into the groove of things out there, and it's not going to be too little too late as far as getting some results in the 2006 season, but as far as posting results for those 2006 sponsors is not doing so much for them in the 06 season. But if those guys will stick with him, looking for some great things out of Cole Calkins in the years to come. As we wrap up lap number 1, and Nathan Canny is your lap 1 leader. Jimmy Jarrett running in the number 2 spot. In the number 3 spot is Juha Salmon, and Mullins still in the number 4 spot, and Whibley rounding out your top 5 as we check them out as they come across the Suzuki Grand National Cross Country finish line. Now with 1 lap in the history books, let's take a look at our Rocky Mountain Rider Tip of the Week.
This is Aaron from Rocky Mountain ATV-MC with this week's Rider Tip of the Week. To many racers, looking fast is just as important as actually being fast, and a great way to look fast and showcase your sponsors is through custom printed decals from Attack Graphics. Attack Graphics decals are both durable and scratch resistant. Attack Graphics motorcycle number plate backgrounds include enough decals to do all 3 number plates, and even includes a free mini front number plate decal. Attack Graphics ATV number plate backgrounds come in 3 or 4 plate versions and also include a free mini front number plate decal. To complement your number plate backgrounds and dress up your machine even more, Attack Graphic also offers fork guard decals, front fender decals, rear fender decals, and swing arm decals. For just $29.99, these number plate backgrounds and all other Attack Graphics decals can be found at RockyMountainATVMC.com or call for a free catalog.
Lap 2 racing action here at Unadilla Valley Sports Center and the Unadilla GNCC Round 11 of the Suzuki Grand National Cross Country Championship. Nate Canny making his way by the 3/4 mile mark, and that is the second turn region off the starting line itself. So you're familiar with that section. It looks a little different this time through, though. Jarrett running in the number 2 spot. Got some good air coming out of that little creek section there. And let's see, Juha Salmon not nearly as aggressive there as we see him just trying to stay up on 2 wheels. And look at that, Juha Salmon, normally the cleanest rider on the racetrack, appears to be quite possibly the dirtiest right now as he made his way by him. We've only got 1 lap in the history book, so you got to wonder, how long of a day is this going to be for Juha? He's still in the number 3 spot, so that's pretty good. Cole Calkins still holding steadily back there in the number 5 spot. As we try to look back a little further, and Paul Whibley still in contention up there for a top 5 overall, but he's dropped off to a 6th place position. A lot of things could factor into there. Could have stopped in the pits for a pair of goggles, some fresh gloves somewhere along the way. A lot of different things can happen. Barry Hawk in a 7th place position, getting off to a sluggish start. Jimmy Jarrett has now moved into the lead. Jarrett has gotten around Nathan Canny, so Canny must have made some mistakes somewhere, and it's easy to do as we see Salmon now up to the number 2 position. So changes, they are coming here at the Unadilla GNCC. How are things tightening up back there behind Salmon? And there's Mullins in the number 3 spot now. Look at the ruts that Charlie Mullins is trying to push through. Those are only going to get deeper and deeper as the race wears on. Canny in a 4th place position, dropping from 1st to 4th. You know that he's probably thinking right now, I threw this one away. Just trying to stay out of the ruts and then eventually having to actually drop right down in it. Whibley up to a 5th place position now as he's gotten around Cole Calkins. What happened to the 187 machine? Maybe mud hole at the 1.5 mile marker may have taken its toll on him. We're out near the 2.5 now. There's Calkins again. Barry Hawk in 7th. He's closing the gap. We might see Barry Hawk actually start to work his way up through the pack now. Justin Williamson drops from a 6th place position into an 8th place spot on the Williamson Racing Yamaha. Thad Duvall, look at this. He is a 258 class contender, and look who's behind him. It's motocross light superstar Brock Hepler in the 10th place position on his FMF Suzuki. Traditionally, we see him on a Makita Suzuki, but today he's riding with the boys off-road. As we head out to check in with our leaders once more, it is Nate Canny back up front. How did he pull that off? Charlie Mullins has dropped off to a 2nd place position, and U-Haul back to 3rd. So Salmonen struggling in the deep muds of New York. Maybe we have found his weakness finally. Paul Whibley now up to a 4th place position. He started out in a 5th place spot, dropped off the 6th, and now has rocketed it into 4th, getting that much closer to the podium position finish. And back there in the number 5 spot, Justin Williamson now moving up from 6th to a 5th place spot. So some changes, again, taking place out here. And what happened to Jimmy Jarrett? Jarrett fell completely out of the top 5. He was a leader there at one point, and now is not even a contender for a top 5 position. So we'll see if we can find him somewhere out there on that racetrack. It's littered with a lot of riders in a lot of mud. You can't really tell who's who out there. It's tough to see that that was even Juha Salmonen that checked in there just a moment ago. And looking back there a little further, we got, is that Charlie Mullins or is that the 23 machine? Like I said, it's just really tough to see who's who out there, especially as the race wears on and these number plates gets covered more and more with the New York mud. Picking the action up now on the motocross track as we check in with our leader again, Nathan Canny. And Canny may, if he can continue to do this and be there right at the right time whenever the end of this race rolls around at the end of 3 hours total, Canny could post his first ever win. And if he does it, it'll be in his home turf. And I know that there's a lot of folks here in the great state of New York, the Empire State, where they're going to be really stoked with Nathan Canny's accomplishments. He's out front now. Mullins running in the number 2 spot. We're seeing a lot of changes take place during this race. Juha Salmonen running in the number 3 spot now here on lap number 2 as he dives down into the gravity cavity. Paul Whibley running in the number 4 spot now. Justin Williamson in the number 5 spot. So we haven't seen a lot of change in the last mile or so for these guys, but the gaps are starting to open up just a little bit as we look back a little further in the pack. We're starting to see some of our A-class riders and B-class riders make their way into the ranks of things. And actually, I think that's one of our 250A riders. That could be the number 19 of Jesse Robinson, who is now running in the number 1 spot of the 250A class off of row number 2. Back out on the trail now. Canny continues to hold on to the lead with Mullins in second. We see this pro rider coming through right here. That's number 18 of Doug Blackwell in the Sports Cycles Racing Suzuki. Unfortunate for him, it looks like the mud took its toll on lap number 1, so he's trying to make up for lost ground right now. Salmonen still running in the number 3 spot. The New Zealander, Paul Whibley, in the number 4 spot aboard the number 275 as we see him check in. And Justin Williamson again in the number 5 spot. So no changes in our top 5 over the course of the last mile or so. So at least those guys are staying consistent with what's going on now. Look how slow some of these B-class riders are going, just trying to work their way around the course. And when we started out, and most of the track that we look at is pretty sloppy out there. But look, we're starting to see some dry dirt, and that's a good sign for some of these riders. One reason that we're seeing in this section of the trail is this is a trail that had not been ridden on until these pro riders came through, because it was just a part of the pro track only for the bikes. We didn't run any of the ATVs on it yesterday, and we didn't run any of the amateurs on it early this morning. So they're getting some sections of the track that are new, and it's a little bit nicer and a little bit easier for them to manipulate the course for them. So there we see Canny checking in. We see more lap traffic before we get back to the number 2 spot of Charlie Mullins, and there's Mullins finally coming through. Reports are clutches are beginning to smoke. We're getting reports that Barry Hawk may be losing his clutches, and the pit crew is telling us that when he made his way through there after the end of lap number 1, they could literally smell the clutch plates burning as he made his way by the pit section there. Salmonen checking in. Look at the gap back to 3rd place. It's amazing how much of a gap we have between the top 3 riders. Usually we're seeing these guys run wheel to wheel, at least the top 3 or 4 riders, but today it's almost a single-man race. It's man against the elements out here on this race course. There's Jimmy Jarrett holding on to a 4th place position, actually moving back up into 4th. He dropped out of the top 5 for just a few moments, but it looks like he's moved back into the number 4 position. Jarrett is a rider that had some good luck whenever he first made his way up from the 250A ranks and the amateur ranks, and this kind of slid back into the woodworks, if you will, over the course of the last couple of years due to injury and a couple of other things. A lot of it, too, a lost heart for the sport of racing. But Jimmy Jarrett has actually found that desire once more. Got a good sponsorship ride from the folks at Andrews Suzuki up in Salem, Ohio, which is actually owned by the Fred Andrews family. And that's some good incentive for him to go out and do well, and it's proven in his results. He hasn't gotten on the podium yet this year, but he's been just shy of it several times. As, again, we watch more and more of these amateur class riders make their way around. Again, the course is enough of an obstacle. You throw out there not only the course itself, but throw a lot of riders out on the track, and it's going to create some interesting racing as far as the front five are concerned, as we've already seen it through our first lap and a half of racing. Canny still out front in the number 1 spot as we're just past the halfway point of lap number 2 now and working our way toward the finish line region. Second place still Mullins, as he's just trying to keep his head down and charge as much as possible up through these tight wood sections. This is not really a tight section, but it gets tight because the ruts are very deep, and you only got so many choices that you can take up through there, because if you get off the beaten trail, you could possibly find yourself in a lot more trouble than what you would in some of those ruts, at least at this juncture in the race. Might want to let some of those other amateur riders blaze some new lines out there, so lap 3, 4, and so on will probably open up a few alternate lines for our riders to make passes later in the race, but they're going to have to make more than passes. They're going to make up a lot of time the way the gaps are starting to spread out here amongst our top 5 riders anyway. Was that Barry Hawk trying to make his way through there? We see more of our pro riders back there just trying to struggle to keep in the flow of things out there. Like I said, Barry Hawk's losing those clutches. He's dropped back to about an 8th place spot right now. The farthest we've seen him up right now has been to a 7th place position, and it's things like this that change the face of the race out there. You get a pro rider like Nate Canny behind one of these guys. Had that guy gotten stuck, it would have possibly opened the window of opportunity for Mullins to make the pass, but didn't quite happen that way. But you can see how easily things like that could come to pass. Salmon running 3rd, Wibbly in the number 4 spot. Williamson still rounding out your top 5, as we see Jarrett bouncing in and out of the top 5 occasionally. We've seen him back up to a 4th place position, at least for a few moments, so looks like Jarrett has got his own problems out there. End of another lap, Nathan Canny, your leader, as he checks into the barrels, and looks like a little bit of a gap starting to open up as Mullins, who's running in the number 2 spot, checks in for 2nd place. Now through the pits, Salmon and your 3rd place rider. See if he'll stop in for a quick gas stop, and that is not the case. Didn't even think about it. No hesitations whatsoever through the pits, so they must have their strategy worked out. Back out on the trail at the 3/4 mile mark now. Nathan Canny still commanding the lead here in his home state of New York. Will he be able to hang on to it to the checkers? Time will tell the story. Mullins running in the number 2 spot as we keep an eye on several of our other classes that are going to be making their way through this section of the course. Picking up with our leaders again out near the 2.5 mile marker. Here comes Nate Canny Track's starting to dry out some. Ruts are getting deep, though, but it's not as sloppy as it was on the first lap or so through there. So we're starting to see some dry dirt. We're getting down to where some traction can actually be gotten for these riders, but the ruts are getting deep. How long are they going to be able to utilize those ruts? Probably for only one more lap. When you get about 500 riders using the same ruts out there, makes it a little difficult. It gets a little bit deeper whenever you make your way around for the next lap. Salmon is still holding on to a solid third, and this is a non-traditional run for him, as he nearly came in contact with a lapped rider there, it looked like, out on the trail, who was sitting sideways in the course. So though some riders are using those ruts to make their way up that hill, while others are getting out of the ruts and getting in some of that slicker stuff. And we saw that one rider down on the track and setting broadside, and Salmonen had to work his way around. Whibley's dropped back onto a 7th place position now aboard that Moose Racing Parts Unlimited Honda. Tough break for him. Barry Hawk holding steady back in 8th. And I know this has got to be a very, very disheartening race for Barry Hawk today. Nathan Canny back out on the motocross track once more. The world-famous Unadilla Valley Sports Center down into the gravity cavity. He's not attacking it too much. He's getting a little bit of air there for the race fans, but he knows most importantly right now he's got to hold on to that number 1 position. There's Mullins running in the number 2 spot. And back in the number 3 spot, Salmon is still back there, but both of these youngsters are starting to walk away and pull away from the 3rd place ride of Salmon in the 111. Now, Salmon doesn't have a lot of incentive really to come out and win. He's already wrapped up the 2006 GNCC championship title. It's a matter of a ride for pride, but as we've seen so far in the 06 season, it seems like Salmonen struggles just a little bit in the sloppy conditions. But as things are starting to look a little bit better, as the race wears on, you got to wonder if maybe Salmonen will pick up the pace. And generally in that last hour, Salmonen is running hard, he's running fast, and he's tough to pass, and he's tough to beat. And he usually makes a lot of passes if he's trying to make up for lost time, and we'll see if he's able to do that in the last few laps. But we still got a ways to go in this race before we'll even be near the finish line of this race and the conclusion of a 3-hour extravaganza here at the Unadilla Valley GNCC. Out at the 4.5-mile marker now. Nathan Canny still holding on to first. Look at this. No lap traffic. Little breathing room for the RER Motor City Yamaha racer. And you can see he is very calculated in his line choice out there. This is that bike pro-only section we're seeing again that's not nearly as tattered and torn as the rest of the course. Mullins holding on the second again, riding a very calculated race. Sometimes you got to know when to go fast and know when to go slow. And Salmonen, I think, has taught these guys a lot of that. There's Jarrett, look at this, up to 4th place, and he's knocking on the door of Juha Salmonen now. So Jarrett, who is up front at one point in this race, has dropped back to as far as a 6th place position, but worked back up into 4th place now. Him and Whibley are sharing the same fate here at the Unadilla GNCC, as they both cannot seem to break farther ahead than their 4th place position, but they are holding steady in those 4, 5, and 6 positions out there. So that's good news for those guys. Good, consistent riding could put them there where they need to be when the checkers finally do come out at the end of 3 hours. Again, these guys up front, it's not going to take them much to get caught up and hung up in one of those bottlenecks out of there. And if they get in one of the massive bottlenecks and can't get around these guys, it's going to make for some great changes out there, I believe. Looks like Hepler is in a 7th place position now. John Dowd, another Suzuki pilot, is up to an 8th place position. If you remember, John Dowd, the Junkyard Dog, racing in this weekend's races along with Brock Hepler. And Junkyard Dog actually raced at the Wisp GNCC the 9th round just before the long summer break. Nearly podium there, and it was in similar conditions, but we were faced with a lot of rocks and mountainous terrain there at the Wisp GNCC, so it doesn't look like things are treating the former motocross and supercross star of John Dowd quite as well as what he would have liked this race to have treated him close to his hometown. Actually, he said he only drove about 3 hours to get to this particular race. A little bit longer than that for Brock Hepler, but, you know, Brock has been one of those riders. He's ridden in the woods his entire life. Actually, him and his dad goes out and rides around with his dad's friends quite often on trail rides, even to this day. And but he's never been in race conditions. And look at that. Those are the kind of things that you lose time with. And fortunately, no pro riders behind him. And I'm sure that rider probably not contending for the number 1 spot in his class. Maybe he was, but if he was, it took him some time to get that machine back up that hill halfway up, and then looping it out like that's going to take a toll on your lap times on this race course. So four-stroke A riders making their way through now as we hear the deep sounds of that four-stroke trying to muscle its way up that hill. Charlie Mullins has moved into the number 1 spot. What happened to Nathan Canny? We'll have to try to get a check on that. Nate Canny's dropped back to second, and calculated moves might not have been nearly as calculating in some of the other sections of the race course, and it came back to bite him just a little bit. Meanwhile, Salmon holds steadily back in third, but doesn't appear to be gaining any ground on these guys, at least at this moment, in this juncture in the race. That could change, though, as the race wears on. As we have pointed out, Salmon usually about the 2-hour mark, after the 2 hours, gets on the gas. And that they're not some of the more smooth riding that we've seen U-Haul Salmon actually able to pull off in his racing endeavors. So the mud is the great equalizer, as they call it out here. Jimmy Jarrett running in that solid 4th place position as we head out to the pits. And the Ampro Yamaha pits, looks like Hot Rod is in for a fresh pair of those Scott goggles, a fresh pair of gloves, it looks like, and topping off that fuel tank. So he's going to try to hold on to that one. Now Salmon has moved into 2nd place. Don't know what happened to Canny. I'd say Canny probably pitted just before this because he's not pitting on the main pro row. He's not one of the top 10, so therefore he doesn't necessarily have a position on the main pro row. He's on what they call the auxiliary pro row, and a lot of times those riders go through that section of the course before they actually go through the pro pit. So that's why we're seeing some changes taking place here at the end of this lap and the beginning of the next lap of racing. Where we see in the pits, looks like Jesse Robinson pitting out of the Monster Energy Pro Circuit Kawasaki. Jimmy, his dad, fueling him up there and getting him a drink of water. And, you know, again, Robinson has been on the throttle all year long. He's been in the mix with the top 10 several different occasions. And he's right back up there with them one more time as we look a little further into our overall pro standings right now. As we told you, John Dowd was running in an 8th place position now. It looks like Robbie Jinks is running 9th. Barry Hawk has dropped all the way back to 10th.
All right, halfway through Unadilla, and surprised with the order of the day. Rachel, you've been down here in the pits watching this. Nate Canny leading for a while. Now Charlie Mullins out front. Both of them have never won one of these before.
Yeah, we've had quite a battle out there. There's so many different lines because of the mud, and so they pass each other back and forth all day, and it's been quite an amazing battle so far. They're both looking for their first win, and this is a home track for Nate Canny, so gotta expect that.
Yeah, he's got a lot of people cheering for him, no doubt about it. But U-Haul, of course, is in the mix. That's the shark in the waters. Let's talk about the motocrossers. You've been down here in the pits. Brock Hepler, John Dowd, not probably starting out the way they wanted.
No, we haven't really heard much about John Dowd. Brock Hepler went down on the first corner of the start, which was unfortunate for him, but he's working his way back up. John Dowd, we never know. He might make his way back up.
He did it at Wisp. Their guys learned very quickly this is a completely different ball game than motocross. We'll be here as the laps click down.
Thanks, Jason and Rachel, for that insightful update there as we check back in with our leader, Charlie Mullins, on the Ampro Yamaha number 4. Is he going to capture his first win ever in a GNCC? We'll have to wait and see. He's only a rookie, and he's been on the podium so much you kind of forget that he's never actually been atop of the podium because he's been behind guys like that, the 111 of U-Haul Salmon. Coming around 4th place be Jimmy Jarrett. Down goes the rider. Is that Jarrett on board that number 158? Let's watch that one more time on our Yamaha slow motion replay. See exactly how that all come to pass. He was trying to make a pass there, it looks like. Went to the far left-hand side and just, well, laid it over. It was just a rookie mistake, I guess you could say. Sometimes, well, a muddy mistake. Those happen very easily out in the mud, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more of that. And if we could follow these guys around all the way around the race course, we'd see some better crashes than that for even U-Haul Salmon. And we'll just, again, keep an eye out. There's Justin Williamson, 5th place rider, checking in with us now here on lap number 4 here at this 3/4 mile mark just before the start. Actually, out of the 2nd turn of the start, or actually 3rd turn of the start, you see that Suzuki banner. That's turn 3 off the starting lines. We head out toward the Suzuki Special Test section. Your leader checking in with us now, that is the number 4 of Charlie Mullins, or is that Nate Canny? I think that was Canny aboard the number 14. It's hard to even tell with the way the numbers are now, and that might be Mullins now checking in the number 2 spot, so we might see some changes already taking place. Look how deep the ruts are. This is way up to the foot pegs and beyond in some of the cases. I mean, these guys are stuck, literally stuck out there. You're going to have to get some of those mud fleas into the race out on the track and start pulling these guys out. There comes a guy. He's volunteering to be a mud flea, it looks like. He sees that's a pro rider. He wants to get him up out of there and on his way as quickly as possible. And this could be the saving grace for U-Haul Salmon. And line choice is going to be critical for him through here if he chooses the correct lines. Whether or not he's going to follow other riders through, maybe get stuck. Look at that, right up out of that rut. He cuts the line short, but he's stuck on a tree and has to choose yet another alternate line. But good moves by Juha Salminen. Jimmy Jarrett paddling his way through those deep ruts now. And sometimes that's just what you got to do. Paddle, paddle, paddle. Got to be tough on you at the end of the day. I'm sure a lot of these riders are going to be more worn after this race than what they are after normal races. Canny in the number 1 spot now, as we had thought that might be the case. Mullins in second. Salminen still in the number 3 spot. Jarrett still running in the number 4 spot. It's Whibley in 5th. Justin Williamson running in the number 6 spot. And back in the number 7 spot, looks like that one is going to be Brock Hepler. Hepler still holding steady in the 7th place position, down in 8th place. And back in that 9th place position, has Barry Hawk been able to make any ground out there? Jimmy Jarrett getting stuck right there from that 4th place position. It's Robbie Jinks still in 9th, and Hawk is running in 10th. But Jarrett, as you can see, even the best of the mud riders, even Ohio mud riders like Jimmy Jarrett struggling out there. Charlie Mullins, Hot Rod Mullins, is an Ohio rider, but does not appear to be struggling. But one of the things to point out about Mullins is he's an Ohio rider, but he's not your traditional southeastern Ohio rider that usually has to deal with a lot of the mud. He comes from out of the Cincinnati area in the southwestern part of the state, so they don't have nearly as the type of terrain or the type of conditions, the type of soil that they have in southeastern Ohio that seems to suit the guys like Fred Andrews and Jimmy Jarrett and guys like that. Charlie Mullins dropping off to a 3rd place position now, as it's starting to take its toll on him here past the halfway point of this race. Or has it? Now Charlie Mullins is out front and Juha Salminen in 2nd. So Canny was out front, Salminen in 2nd, Mullins back in 3rd. Now Mullins is up to 1st. Nate Canny's dropped off to 3rd place. But Juha Salminen stays the same in that number 2 position aboard the 111. And look at this, Justin Williamson now up to a 4th place position on board his Yamaha. So way to go, Justin. Justin is inching his way closer and closer toward the end of this race. And not only that, but toward maybe his 2nd ever GNCC podium. Paul Whibley, who was looking at that position only a few miles ago, a lap or so back, Paul Whibley has now dropped back off to a 5th place position. Out near the 5-mile markers, we've seen there, it looked like Hepler is working his way up through the pack. Now we head for the battle for the lead. Salminen, Mullins, and Caney have all locked handlebars, and this is the tightest racing we've seen since the drop of the green flag now. And it looks like Caney has won the battle and moved into the number 1 spot. New leader again. How many lead changes have we had today? Charlie Mullins running in the number 2 spot. What happened to Salminen, who had been consistently running in 2nd there for the last lap and a half or so? Now Salminen drops back off to 3rd. Look, Salminen appears to be struggling today. No goggles on the face of the Suzuki Grand National Cross Country Champion, Juha Salminen. He has got his work cut out for him here. Leader again, Nathan Canny, in amongst the lap traffic. He seems to be getting through there okay. You got to wonder if they know who he is. Obviously, they got to know it's some sort of pro rider coming through, because he is blazing his way through the hills of Unadilla here. Canny now working his way toward the end of another lap. Meanwhile, Mullins trying to reel him back in. It's hard to believe that less than 2 miles ago, these riders were basically wheel to wheel working their way through some of those wooded sections. But again, lap traffic and mud holes have changed the face of this race once more as Salminen begins to lose more time. He had caught him. He lost as far back as about 40 seconds on the front 2 riders, and now after catching those guys has dropped back another 25 seconds. So Salminen does it look like almost motioning those guys to get out of his way as he's just trying to make up whatever lost time he can out there. In for a pit stop, Nathan Canny now, and looks like D-Rob, Dennis Robertson from Chain Drive Race Support down there, giving him a little moral support. Actually, Robertson, his son, Christopher Robertson, got off to a 4th place position off the hole shot there in the start of this race. He's on that ThumperTalk.com Yamaha out there. Mullins still running in the number 2 spot as we head out of the auxiliary pits into the main pro pits. That's that little chicane you've seen there. And now Salminen in for a pit stop. And it doesn't look like he's in a lot of, pushing himself real hard. Here's why. We're getting reports now that Salminen faced down in a mud hole. He went swimming, I guess literally knee-deep, plus that and more water. And right now he's conversing with Antti Callan. He's taking off. Let's head down to the pits and see what Antti has to say.
Well, that was our second pit, and Juha needed to change the gloves and goggles. He fell down on some mud hole, and his gloves is completely muddy and wet, so it took a little bit more time this time, but now he has new gloves and clean goggles, and hopefully he can now catch the time what we lose, and we don't need to stop anymore.
Antti Callan, a new team leader there at KTM Off-Road as we head out near the 3/4 mile marker. It's still Nathan Canny out front, Mullins in second. Salminen losing more time back there in third place with that extended pit stop. But again, that could be the best thing for him because Salminen now with the dry gloves and the fresh goggles, we look again, is that, no, that's not Salminen. I thought, not already. Salminen hasn't already lost those goggles in 3/4 of a mile of racing. So that is actually number 33, Chris Bazzelli, that is working his way through that section. So Bazzelli has lost his goggles out there, but Salminen hasn't. Whibley still runs in fifth, right behind Justin Williamson, and Brock Hepler up to a sixth-place position. Will Hepler be able to break into the top five? We'll find out as we head now down to the Suzuki Special Test, and we'll find out about Hepler a little more later on, and more so toward the end of the race. We haven't seen him in quite some time. But there we see the leaders paddling their way through. There goes Mullins. Basically using the same line as lapped riders, and sometimes you don't want to do that. That can cause you problems, and that can cost you a lot of time. Momentum seems to be the key for Juha Salminen through this section. And look at this, these guys pointing out the lines for him, trying to tell them where the smoother lines are so they can get through. Nathan Canny back out on the famous Unadilla Valley Sports Center motocross. You see the race fans with their hands in the air. You can see that there's a lot of those Nate Canny race fans out there that are cheering him on, and that's got to be some great incentive for him. Not only that, some great confidence from last year's ride where he nearly took the win, but at the same time, you got to think that being up front has got to have a lot of pressure on it, especially for Nathan Canny, because he's not a rider that's normally a podium contender. And being here in his home state of New York, these folks are expecting him to be up there, especially after the phenomenal ride that he put there last year. And you know what's amazing is he's able to perform here at Unadilla without much problem. And I know that he's probably scratching his head right now saying, what's so much different here than any other race that I go to? Is it just being at home and just having the support that I've got, or what is the secret combination to racing in New York for Nathan Canny? Mullins running in the number 2 spot, and I know he's thinking the same thing. He's like, hey, I could have done walked away with this race by now, but I can't because Nathan Canny keeps passing me every time I get the lead out there. Salminen at the same time trying to play catch-up, still got those fresh goggles, still got those fresh gloves, so he's beginning to inch up and take more and more time off the gap that has opened up between second and third. Back out on the trail now, Nathan Canny. This is a bike-only section of this trail. Again, opened up after the rains this morning, so it actually is not nearly as bad. This is probably an area of the racetrack where these riders are resting. It gives them an opportunity, a very slow-speed section for a couple of different reasons. One is it's still a little bit slick, I'm sure, in that soil because it hasn't even been dug down to the dry stuff yet. And secondly, because it's a little tighter, and these riders are having to manipulate through trees and underbrush and things like that, so they're able to rest a little bit through there. Here comes, again, the battle for the lead as it's tightened up one more time. Canny, Mullins, and Salminen. Mullins is closing the gap between first and second, and every time it looks like these two are pulling away from the number 111, Salminen is able to close the gap and put the pressure on once more. We've got a major pressure cooker underway, heading towards the end of lap number 5 as we now are into lap number 5. Looks like Canny at the end of 4, heading into 5 in the lead. Mullins running second, Salminen in third, Justin Williamson running in the number 4 spot, and Paul Whibley rounding out the top 5. Now, Whibley's been running consistently right around that top 5 spot for the last few races, and in doing so has actually rocketed himself into a 5th place position overall in the point standings. Out near the 7.5 mile marker now, and Canny back with a gap there in that number 1 spot there just a few miles ago. We saw how tight it was, but again, he's able to stretch it out. Mullins still in the number 2 spot and has stretched it out over Juha Salminen, so Salminen can't even keep the pace. Whatever's happening out there, it's making some major changes and some big mix-ups in our leaders and slowing them down some more than others. Looks like Canny is getting the best line choices. And, you know, we were talking a lap ago about the difference in how deep those ruts were and how you had to use that line and you didn't want to get off the into an alternate line just yet. We've seen there that they're actually beginning to use alternate lines up that hill section because the ruts are getting so deep out there. There's Mullins once more still in the second place position. He has not seen Nathan Canny for a couple of miles. He's staying just far enough ahead of him to stay out of sight of Charlie Mullins. There's the line choices being pointed out. I believe that's Jeff Smith that's helping Charlie out there. Smith from the Impro Yamaha pits. So they've got some spotters out there in the woods, and that really helps those guys out quite a bit. Juha Salminen getting the cheers from the crowd saying, "Go, Juha, go." And he is going just as hard as he can right now. Calculated hard as he can because he doesn't want to go too awful hard because he doesn't want to make too many mistakes. Again, right there, it looks like Salmon is struggling to get out of that section of the course. Canny around this time, white flag, one more to go. Canny, hang on to it. Going to have to wait for another 10 miles or so to find out for sure, but Nathan Canny was in this position only a year ago. Then he saw it slip away on that final lap of racing. Let's check in with Jason Wygant.
Here it is, folks. Last lap. Nate Canny is about 8 miles away from making history. A privateer is going to try to win a GNCC, which is basically unheard of. The kid comes to the races in a van. He drives it everywhere. He doesn't have a trainer. He basically spends all his time on the road driving to the races. He doesn't get to train and test and practice like all the riders he's beating today. But he has one thing on his side no one else does. He is from New York. And you know there's a lot of people in those woods cheering him on right now. They know the number 14 is only a few miles away from winning his first ever GNCC. It would be a tremendous upset. It would be historic. There's got to be a lot of pressure on that kid. Let's see if Nate Canny can hold on this final lap.
That's what's so amazing about GNCC racing is that virtually anybody can come out and on any given day actually take the win. You don't have to be a factory-supported rider. You just have to have everything fall into place in your favor, and that appears to be what has happened for Nathan Canny here today. You know, and it's really neat because GNCC racing is for every man, woman, and child out there. There's a class and a riding classification that you can go out and do well and perform well and be competitive in, and that's what makes GNCC so cool, because at the same time you get a race with guys like world champions and GNCC champions like Rodney Smith and Juha Salminen and Barry Hawk and all those guys. So it's really neat to know that you can share the race course, the same race course at the same time with those types of riders. And if you've never been GNCC racing and you're just a fan from the TV and the magazines and things like that, log on to GNCCRacing.com and find out what the schedule is like. I know that you'll be completely satisfied if you get a chance to go out. Looks like Salminen has now moved up to second place as Mullins has dropped off to third. We've seen more changing taking place. Williamson in fourth, Whibley in fifth, and Brock Hepler still solidly in a sixth place position. Nathan Canny, alternate line choices out there. He does not want to take any unnecessary risks and chances. And as you can see, riding conservatively, he almost goes down there. But just make your way to the top of this hill and get back on the trail. He looks behind him to see who's back there, and he sees nothing but lap traffic and 111 of Juha Salminen, who's running in that number 2 spot, but just cannot get close enough to Nate Canny to make the pass. Same thing there. Looks like Juha looking over his shoulder to see where Charlie Mullins happens to be, or was he enjoying the sight of some of these amateur riders that are struggling to make their way up through some of these particular sections. We got one over there steaming and smoking and carrying on, and there's a second one. Looks like a blown water line quite possibly there, as we got a lot of steam coming out. These machines are beginning to overheat. The mud is beginning to pack in, and looks like that rider without a helmet. Nope, he's not racing without a helmet, folks. He's just trying to get that bike from out of the lower reaches of that valley. That was Andrew Matuzik's bike from Fayetteville, Georgia. I don't think that was Andrew, though, himself. So whoever was riding that out, looks like Andy might be a little bit tired out there, or maybe even needing to take a rest. So that's exactly what he's doing right now. Paul Whibley back in fifth place. Looks like Mullins still trying to play catch up here in the final laps of racing here at the Unadilla GNCC. There's Hepler aboard the number 60 Suzuki machine. And, hey, you know, got to say, a very commendable ride by that rider here at the GNCC Series. And we're happy to have him here, a part of our 2006 racing season. There goes Nathan Canny. Listen to the New York crowd cheering him on. You know his heart's got to be pounding hard now at the 3.5-mile marker now. They're telling him, you've got a big lead, you've got a big lead. Is that a good thing to tell him? Will he maybe slow down too much and open the window of opportunity for riders like Salmonen or even Mullins to close that gap and challenge him before the end of this lap of racing? Nearly a 9-mile race course is what they're looking at here, and they're at the 3.5-mile marker, so about 6 or so miles that they've got still to travel here at Unadilla before we will see the checker flag fly. Canny, Salmonen, Mullins, Williamson, and Whibley. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's been basically the same players. Wow, did you see Juha Salmonen launch out of there? Looks like he may be on a mission right now, and that could spell disaster for Nathan Canny's first ever win. Juha Salmonen can make up time, and we're hearing that he's already made up about 10 seconds of that gap over the course of the last 2 miles is what the reports we're getting off of the track from the crew itself out there. We'll see it, though, whether it's going to be enough or if it's too little too late for the defending and current champion, the new champion of the 2006 Suzuki GNCC Series, of course, Juha Salmonen. There is Mullins still trudging along back in the number 3 spot. You got to wonder if he's thinking, hey, just be satisfied with a third-place finish here today and leave it at that, or if he's thinking charge, charge, charge down to the end and maybe force himself into a mistake. Right now, Charlie Mullins cannot really afford to lose a lot of championship points and still remain in the top 5. He's still one of the top 4 contenders as far as points are concerned, but he does not want to take any of those unnecessary chances out there. We see the number 26. He's struggling to get through as Nathan Canny goes on by without much problem whatsoever. So riders, some of them probably using this time to rest because it's got to take a lot out of them to just work their way through the race course out there. It's got to be tiring. Their clothes are starting to get wet and muddy. Their feet are wet and muddy. Their hands are wet and muddy. Their clothes are heavy just from the water and the mud. The bikes are heavier than what they traditionally are and normally are, so it's taking their toll on them physically out there right now. And back out front, we see Nathan Canny in the number 1 spot. Juha Salmonen trying to close that gap. How much of that gap he's been able to close? Sounds like about another 10 seconds that he's been able to shave off at this 8-mile marker, near the 8-mile marker here at the Unadilla GNCC. And Mullins, look at this. Mullins is losing more time, just trying to keep the pace. He's actually getting too much wheel spin and nearly didn't make it to the top of that hill. Nathan Canny by, Juha Salmonen by, and Charlie Mullins still working his way. Whoa, down goes one of our riders. He gets a little out of shape. You know, that's probably got to be a blessing for him at this point, too. I'm sure that he is tired. The way that rider hit the ground, he looked as though he was a little worn. So he's going to take that as an advantage point for him to get a little bit of rest and maybe try to recoup and get back into it as we see him doing that. But he just shot up out of that little gully there. A little bit too much throttle, looped it out, and just kind of took him off the pace for just a few moments as we check in with another rider. There's Mullins by in third. Again, it's amazing how much of that gap is opening up there. There goes Whibley by. Actually, that was Williamson that went by, I believe, aboard the number 12, and then that was Whibley that went by aboard the number 275 Honda. So those guys are staying consistent. That's one thing you can say about today's race, that the top 5 riders have been very consistent in their efforts at this Unadilla Valley GNCC. Looks like another pro Yamaha rider, and that one's the number 2 of Barry Hawk. Hawk back in about an 8th place position. Well, that's the best he's been able to pull off so far. There's the number 17 machine, and I think that might be one of our 258 class riders. That is Scott Watkins from Latonia, Ohio, as Watkins taking over the lead now in the 258 class, and it appears that might be the case. Robinson was up there for a little while. We've seen Thad Duvall up there for a little while, but right now it is the 17 of Scott Watkins, and Watkins, we get to see, well, we've seen him up there a couple of different times, and he's gotten top amateur honors on a couple of different occasions here in the 2006 racing season. Back out front with our leaders, Nathan Canny now, looking over his shoulder once more. There comes Salmonen in the number 2 spot, getting the cheers from the New York crowd. And more lap traffic behind these guys, bouncing off the trees and all. And where is Charlie Mullins? Is Mullins going to be able to hold on to third? There is the 116 of John Dowd, the junkyard dog out there. He's still in a top 10 pro class position out there, but not nearly as strong as what we've seen him at the Wisp. You know, he's got to be wondering why he's not performing like he did there at the Wisp GNCC a few races back and several months ago. Here comes Shane Watts aboard the number 9. That's the first opportunity we've had to see him today. He's not having the best of days here today, but, you know, in talking with Shane before the race today, didn't expect a lot out of him. I don't think he likes the mud, especially on that new bike. Not real sure how it will react in the mud. So whenever we talked to Shane, we knew that his results were not going to reflect a very good turnout today. Usually when you talk to Shane, he's in a good mood before the race. He has exceptional results. If you talk to Shane before the race, he's not in that great a mood. He has less than exceptional results. And I'm just going to have to get Shane pumped up and maybe get him back on that winner's podium, because I know the crowd's looking for it. And look at this. Look at the crowd looking for this rider right here. The number 14 of Nathan Canny did it. He wins the Unadilla Valley GNCC, and the New York crowd goes nuts. Watch him. The family is coming over. The friends are coming over. The fans are coming over. They're all hugging. They're kissing. And even KTM tried to give him a little bit of water and wash some of that mud out of the eyes of that privateer.
That was pretty tough. I must have got stuck 3 or 4 times where it took me and 5 other people to pull my bike out. So every time it happened, I thought it was over. But fortunately, Charlie and Juha had a little bad luck themselves, and I was able to capitalize. So it was good.
Oh, the sweet taste of victory. Nathan Canny, a privateer, winning in his home state of New York as the champagne flies on the podium here at the Unadilla GNCC, the second annual running, and over 1,600 riders participating in this weekend's event at the Unadilla Valley Sports Center. And look at this, Jason Wygant actually losing a bet to Nate Canny. Will have to get his head shaved, Mohawk style. So Nathan Canny gets the clippers out and actually gives him the mullet hawk, which is a mohawk and a mullet at the same time. He'll leave the hair in the back and on the top, but the sides are going. Jason, a really good sport.
Another rough, muddy racetrack out there.
It was rough, yeah. It was one of the gnarliest track this season, I believe, yeah.
Take us through this one, man. I mean, off the bat, you were up front, and then you and Charlie had a good battle going on in that first lap.
Yeah, we have good battle, and I don't know, for some reason I was a little bit sleeping, you know, like right from the start, you know, first couple of laps I didn't feel really good, but you know, then I was like half minute, 30 seconds behind those guys and changed them and catch them, and yeah, well, then I make a couple of mistakes. I crashed once in a water hole, and then I get stuck once, but you know, that was that lap, you know, when everything happened, and I came and I have to change the gloves and goggles and stuff like that. So, well, I lose the game in that lap. So, but you know, the second place it's good. I'm happy with the second place, especially after Nathan, you know, the first win and home race. So, second place is good today.
Collins, man, what a race day.
Yeah, it was a real fun race. Some bad luck got me again and cost me a win.
Man, right off the bat, it looked like you and Juha were just going to walk away with this one.
I got an okay start, then I soon worked my way up to second, and it felt good. I made a mistake and dropped back to like 4th, which I really didn't want to be up front because the track was so bad, and I just kept riding and slowly worked my way up to the front, and once I got in the front, I felt comfortable, and I tried to set my own pace and ride, and I made a couple mistakes here and there, got with a lapper, and second last lap I got caught in a mud hole and buried it pretty good, and last lap I smoked my clutch, and I rode pretty much the whole last lap without a clutch, and it was tough. I'm just happy to get third. I had 2 bad races, and it feels good to be on the podium again.
Jason Wygant, the Mullet Hawk, doesn't look too bad on him. I want to say thanks to Jason as well as Rachel Ayers. I'm Rodney Tomlin. Have a good day, everybody.
The Grand National Cross Country Championship is sanctioned by the American Motorcyclist Association. Rights, riding, racing. AMA. Join now. Call 1-800-AMA-JOIN.